Hey guys, James with Torches and Tactical, and today we're going to go over a light that has had the internet abuzz in the past few weeks, the Sofirn SC33. Now, I'm just going to give you a second to look at it. This is a rear tail switch, almost tactically designed light from Sofirn, and not only that, but it does have an XHP 70.3 high LED, and this LED, in addition to the battery inside, is supposed to give you 5200 lumens of output. That 5200 lumens. Now, as you can probably tell from the short orange peel reflector, is more designed for flood, and that's going to shine out to 327 meters. Now you can probably tell that this is no small light. Even sitting in my hand, this is a rather large unit, and with that rear tail switch, you know you're going to have some controls and some brains up here in the tail switch, since this is a rear tail E-switch. And moving on, I have to say right out of the gate that I am a fan of their more aggressive design. The approach that they've taken with the SC33 over a lot of other lights. Now, this is a very, very welcomed addition, and it gives it a very aggressive look, but still looks small enough that it could be a very usable EDC or pocket light. Now, a 21700 cell, the dimensions this has, it does give it a little bit of girth, and that is going to make it difficult to throw in your pocket just for everyday use, but it's not going to stop me from trying. So real quick, those dimensions are 131 millimeters long, which, if you know metric, is over 5 inches, and that is 32 millimeters wide. So again, not a small light. But real fast, let's go over all of what's included in the packaging. So let's set that aside, and I'm going to try something here. Let's go ahead and smack this package real fast. Okay, it did work. Thank goodness. So here we have the box. Now, it did have a sleeve over it, and this sleeve just has a photo of the light, gives you a couple of the specs, lets you know it is USB Type-C charging, IP68 waterproof, and then it has the 5200 lumens at 1.5 hours, or 1800 lumens at 1.85 hours. Your medium mode is 750 lumens at 5.3 hours. Low is 300 lumens at almost 12 hours, or 11.5 to be specific. And then eco mode is 50 lumens, still a very usable amount of light, but that will run for 45 hours. So we'll get this out of the way and look inside this. So you open this up and you can see a very incredibly dense microcell foam, and this is going to make sure that the light doesn't get damaged to you. It sits in there very, very compact, and you don't have to worry about scratches or a mess up on the surface. So you can see here also XHP 70.3 high, comes in between 4700 and 5300K. Now there is a little bit of a range, but that's just because when you build as many lights as Sofirn does and put them out as cheap as Sofirn does, you got to give a little bit of variance in the range, or the binning, if you will, of your tints. So we'll move this box out of the way. And you can also see the user manual. Now the user manual opens up. This is very concise. It is short, compact, and lets you know everything you need to know. So you have your ANSI NEMA FL1 chart, again with those ratings we just went over. Then more specifications telling you about the 6061 aluminum alloy, orange peel reflector. The tail switch lets you know that it is a boost driver, so it will bump up your 3.7 to 4.2 volt cell all the way to that 6 volts that the XHP 70.3 is looking for. And one of the major notes is that this does have advanced temperature regulation here, ATR. So now this is going to step it down, so you're not going to sit here and burn your hands on what I have referred to, the Workos TS22, as a very warm illuminated hand warmer. So this will tell you all the ins and outs, and it does have multiple languages in here. We'll get that aside. And in here you do have, now again, it is Sofirn, they put out a ton of lights. So they give you a generic lanyard and a couple of O-rings in case these tear opening it up, or you just feel like replacing them. And finally, a rather long USB-A to USB-C cable. Now, again, I'm not going to use these because I have one sitting on my desk 24/7. So moving back into the light, now I'm just going to move in here a little bit so you can see everything. The Sofirn SC33 is a fantastic looking light with these with these recesses here and a lot of the aggressive knurling on the body or the battery tube. I mean, this looks almost like a really, really fancy tactical or industrial chess piece, if I'm honest. So it is all uniform. It's symmetrical, so everything's even going all the way around, with the exception of this giant, giant pocket clip. But we'll get to that here in a second. So you can see the blasted finish on these crenulations, and those crenulations don't show up too much in the beam pattern, but we will get into that here in a second. So you have this very, very orange peely reflector, and that's going to keep your soft hot spots and your spill. So it's not going to shine out at 900 meters or anything like that, but with that XHP 70.3 high and the orange peel reflector, you get a really, really good mix of over 300 meters, so 327 meters. So that's, I mean, in America, we're looking at over 3 football fields of throw, but it still shines out pretty wide too. So moving down here, there is a flush sitting battery indicator. So when you turn it on, you will see that battery indicator shining here, and that's going to let you know as soon as you turn it on what your battery sits at. Now it does have this hump where that battery indicator is all the way around the Sofirn SC33 here, and then it makes a very aggressive step down into the battery tube. So a similar hump that is on the battery indicator follows down here. It looks almost like the opposite of a recess for a pocket clip, if you will. It does protrude, but then you get into what I think is probably the best part of the SC33, the battery tube. Now this is like a TS22 mixed with an Olight Warrior, mixed with a couple of through night lights. The battery tube is incredibly aggressive. And I mean, you feel every single piece of machining on this thing. There is also a battery indicator that lets you know when the head is off and you're swapping out the battery, that it goes in with the positive end facing towards the head of the light. Now, if you saw me struggling with that, getting the head back on here, I will go over here in just a second. That spring is also absolutely massive. But before we do that, we're going to move to the tail cap. Now the tail cap does have some ridges here, and I mean, I think this is purely aesthetic over anything else, because for the fact that the head comes off and not the tail, you don't really need that much knurling, and I think it could have looked a little more aggressive as opposed to having the typical kind of grip knurling in place. But you will also see back here the USB-C charging port, and it has a very, very thick rubber cover. Now, Sofirn and Workos both have been using this style rubber cover for a while now, and it works really well. It sits more or less flush. It is proud a little bit, but nothing to write home about. And you can see almost keyway notches cut into the very chamfer of this tail cap. And instead of having saddles protecting this, the whole switch does sit recessed after you get past these chamfers. So that E-switch is very responsive. It's one of the better ones I've felt. I wish the TS10 felt like this. Now, it may be the exact same switch. I don't know. I haven't gone into it yet. But I love the way this one feels, and it could just be the cover, too, is a lot more sturdy and deeper, so it doesn't allow as much back and forth rocking like the TS10 does. And finally, there is one change to the SC33 that has improved upon a lot of other Sofirn lights, and that is the pocket clip. Now, this is held in with 3 small Torx screws as opposed to wrapping around, basically being held in with spring resistance. And I really, really like this one. It's not the thickest pocket clip, but in this case, I feel like that's a good thing. You don't feel like this is going to come off at all, since you don't have to worry about pulling off and then the spring releasing here, but it's held in incredibly firmly, and this groove cut in here gives a lot of play, but it's still plenty strong, and it's going to be easy to fit over your pocket should you decide to use that, or a vest or anything else. And I mean, frankly, it looks the part too. Everything about this light looks fantastic, very tactical, yet somehow, dare I say, elegant. So we will go into the battery tube again, and you can see that there are square cut threads on the top of the battery tube. Here, let me come in a little bit so you can see these a little better. Now, since it is raw aluminum, they're going to look gummy pretty quick, but these are well lubricated. We'll get the battery out of there here for a second. And if you look at the thickness of, so it has an inner battery tube as well as the machining on the outside. So this battery tube is incredibly thick, and I will give you a comparison light here in just a second. But that battery tube is incredibly thick, and you can see a spring down here. Well, I hope you can see a spring down here. But there is a spring down here, let's just say. There is a spring down here, and it's more or less one of the thickest springs I've dealt with. Now, that could have to do with the fact that instead of doing a spring bypass, which is a little piece of wire reaching from the top to the bottom, they just put in a giant spring in here, which also ties over to the head as well. Now, I promise you, I'm not some weak little boy, but I'm putting quite a bit of pressure on here, and there is just a ton of spring resistance here. And again, I think the thickness of the spring is to help bypass in a sort. Help with a lot of the resistance that you would get from a longer, thinner spring. So here is the Sofirn battery. It says 50 amps. However, I frankly don't think this is going to put out 50 amps of juice, especially considering this whole thing you can get for $39.99. It is listed at 5,000 milliamp hours. It is a 21700 cell, and it is a flat top battery. Now, I don't know if you're going to fit anything in here that is a protected cell, because those usually do stand about 3 millimeters longer. And frankly, I don't know if you're going to get that out of the spring. So you have to push quite a bit to get it on there. And once you do, and those square cut threads engage, you have a very ready to go tactical light. So for a size comparison, let's go ahead and set down the SC33, and we'll bring out the Workos TS22. Now this is no small light. But if I set it next to it, if I set it next to the SC33, you can see the SC33 dwarfs the TS22 by a not insignificant amount. Now the TS22 is actually the light that we are going to compare the SC33 with here in just a little bit, but I wanted you guys to see exactly the difference. It stands about 8 millimeters taller, which is, again, not an insignificant amount, but it does still seem like it is on the smaller end and still able to use every day. So, getting the TS22 out of the way here for just a little bit, I want to go ahead and go through the user interface here with you. Now, what you can do is simply click that rear tail switch, and that's going to turn on the light, and that is with the auto lock disengaged. Now, when the light is on, you can press and hold, and that will go through your brightness settings. Now this does go through eco, low, medium, and high. And now we're on medium. If I do a double tap, this will give you all 5200 lumens. Oh, and quite a bit of heat. That is quite warm. But you press once from turbo and it'll drop back down to the last mode you were in. In our case, that is medium. But you can also, once the auto lock is disengaged, you can still do a double press from off, and that'll switch over to that turbo mode as well. Another thing is, while you are not in lock mode, you can do a triple click and consider this a strobe warning. This will access your tactical strobe. And then you can triple click again, and that'll switch over to SOS, and triple click again. This is going to activate a beacon. Now you can return to your previously used mode by another single click. In our case, it was off. Now I know one thing that a lot of people find useful is access to a moonlight mode. So as long as it's still unlocked, you can sit and hold this for 1 second, and it will go to your moonlight mode. And from here you can double click to go turbo, or you can simply press and hold to cycle through the rest of those modes. And again, one click will shut the light off. Now I'm going to go ahead and switch hands here for a second and let you know that while the light is on, you can do 4 fast clicks, and it'll blink twice to let you know that it switched from that stepped mode we were in to smooth ramping. And now while it's on, you can press and hold, and that'll ramp up to maximum brightness, or press and hold again after it's already reached it, its highest value to go back down. So whenever you stop, it will change directions. So finally, I just wanted to let you know that that automatic lockout does engage after 1 minute, and you will have to either press 2, 3, or 4 times to disengage that lockout. So now that we've gone over the user interface, let's go ahead and get the SC33 ready, and we'll bring out that TS22 from our friends over at Workos again. And let's get these outside so we can compare the beam patterns between that orange peel and the XHP70.3 high versus the XHP70.2 with a smaller and more shallow reflector. So let's go ahead and do it. All right, and here we have the Sofirn SC33. We're just going to go ahead and ramp up slowly. Now this is the height of the normal modes, and I'll double press to go to turbo. This is the 5,200 rated lumens from the SC33. Now we do have the Workos TS22 to compare. I'm just going to send this one straight up to turbo. Now this is 4,500 lumens from the Workos TS22. All right, now let's head back inside. All right, guys, we went outside with the Workos TS22 and we compared it to the star of today's show anyways, the Sofirn SC33. Now, I want to know what you guys thought down below in the comments. And as far as me, I'm just going to go ahead and say that while the TS22 is basically the epitome of a floodlight, this, with its larger reflector and it seemed like a more aggressive orange peel, if I'm frank, it seemed like it performed very, very admirably, and it might be my new go-to as far as flood is concerned. Now with the TS22, you do see just a little bit of that hotspot in that surrounding flood. However, with the SC33, that hotspot is even less defined, and this is basically all flood all the time, which is really, really nice. And if we're getting into complaints here, I really only do have 2 complaints about the SC33. And that is, 1, that auto lockout. Now, Sofirn, please tell me you're listening. Give us a way to disable the lockout. Now, I mean, put a disclaimer or whatever you need to in the user manual, but give us a way to disable the lockout. Now, the TS22, that can disable the lockout. However, it's not in the manual. But the Sofirn SC33, no matter what combination of buttons I tried, I can't get that auto lock to disengage. And for me, that's kind of disappointing. And the only other thing I would change about the SC33 is the output did seem to be, at least visually for me, it did appear to be a little less than that 5,200 claimed lumens. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing because it still gives you absolutely gobs and gobs and gobs of light. Over 5,000 is what it's rated at, but it did seem like it was pretty spot on with that TS22. Now I know there was a difference in the output tint, but the SC33 did seem like it fell maybe a little bit shy of that 5,200 lumens. And that is in line with what I'd seen in other reviews and other testing. But as far as the positives, I love the look of this. It looks very tactical, but somehow still elegant. It is a very large light, so it does have a nice pocket clip, but I don't know if this is going to be something that you're going to carry every day in your pocket. I usually revert to my 18650 lights when it comes to an actual pocket light. Sometimes especially with a larger battery tube like this, 21700 cells do tend to be a little on the high side. But don't take my word for it. You can go onto sofirnlight.com right now, and I will have a link down below, and you can get the Sofirn SC33. Now, without a battery, it comes in at $39.99, but with that 21700 cell battery, comes in at $43.99, and at $43.99, just get the battery. You know that the battery is going to work. You don't have to worry about it being a button cell, or a button top rather, and not working or being too tight with those really, really stiff springs. And their site often has 10, 15, or even 20% off coupons very frequently. Now, I know these are on their way to Amazon and you can get them a little faster, but if you order it from the Sofirns.com website directly, it will take a little bit longer to get to you because it ships from China. But guys, those are my ins, outs, ups, downs, left, rights, forward, backward, all that stuff. Ultimately, I'm going to sit here and tell you all day that the Sofirn SC33, it does have a couple quirks in that user interface, but it is an incredibly solid light, and I hope you guys like it because I absolutely love this thing. So make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and if you do subscribe, hit that bell notification too, because that's going to let you know as soon as we release new content. And thank you guys so much for being here today. We really, truly appreciate it. And we'll see you in the next one.